Hello and welcome to this 2021 Self-Realization Fellowship World Convocation Online. And a special greeting to all those joining us from San Antonio, from Stuttgart, from Kuala Lumpur, or from wherever you may be, scattered like shining jewels around the world. I'm Brother Prafulananda, and of course I'm here at the Self-Realization Fellowship International Headquarters in Los Angeles. And the topic of this class is God's unconditional love and friendship through the Guru. And so we're going to be addressing this whole topic of the Guru-disciple relationship, which for me is actually daunting because, and I'll tell you the reason, this is a topic that has been covered completely. My very first convocation in the 1970s, this was one of the main talks at that convocation, and I've been to every convocation since then, and it's been one of the main talks ever since. So what left is there to say? And it's not just that everything has been said many times over, it's who has said it and how. Because some of the most inspirational spiritual talks I have ever heard, and I still listen to them, are those given on this subject by some of those towering first-generation disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, such as Sri Dayamata, Mrinalini Mata, Brother Anandamoy. And it's not just that they have said it all, but there's also so much more to say than even that. Because this topic of the Guru-disciple relationship, it expands as we go into it, as we live a disciple's life down the years, down the decades. We find that it interweaves, it intersects with every part of our lives in every aspect of the whole spiritual path. So it's a topic of tremendous scope, but it's also one that goes deeper and deeper as we come back to the same points that we may have heard years ago and thought, well, that's interesting. But we come back to it decades later, and the same thing may stagger us with amazement at the profundity, at the depth of what it actually is. So, it's interesting. I think in other classes we've heard that this is also, this year, 2021, it is the 75th anniversary of the publication of Autobiography of a Yogi, our Guru's spiritual masterpiece. And I find that it's particularly interesting that this subject of the Guru and disciple, it literally bookends Autobiography of a Yogi, both at the start and at the end. These words, this first sentence of our Guru's writing, he says, "The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship." Or we can rephrase that slightly to point out that it's the sacred Guru-disciple relationship. It has a natural connection with the discovery of absolute truth, with the ultimate verities. And this comes about through the processes by which the Guru, who has attained that awareness of the ultimate verities, he elevates the disciple to that same level. Now, in a cosmic sense. The Guru is the divine agent by which God is using that power to counteract cosmic Maya or cosmic delusion. To create the world, to create the universes, God projects the whole cosmos out of his consciousness with this tremendous repelling force, as it were, of cosmic delusion that creates everything, including us in physical bodies. And this is the same power that keeps us deluded in thinking that I'm just this little physical body. I'm a limited, mortal human being for incarnations without any awareness that we really are an immortal soul. But the counter to this negative repelling force of cosmic delusion, God uses another force, that magnetic attracting force of divine love. And the Guru is the manifestation of that force of divine love as it relates to bringing the disciple, the devotee, back home to the source in God. So what we are going to do in this class is we're taking a broad survey of the many different aspects of this progression of this unconditional love and friendship of the Guru as it transforms our consciousness, changing us from what we think we are right now as these limited mortal human beings into what we really are, omniscient, immortal, bliss consciousness. Now, the intersection of the spiritual seeker's life with the Guru, it begins, at least in my thinking, it begins with an awareness that there can actually be an interplay in our lives with some inner source, some divine inner voice that lets us know we're not just alone in this world, that we're not just interacting with outer people and events and that's all there is, but there's something inside that we can relate to. And some devotees have this awareness from a very early age due to association in previous lifetimes with the Guru and his teachings. But for many, it comes later on in life because cosmic delusion, it screens so much from our present consciousness of what we were before, what we did before, who we associated in previous lives, our spiritual efforts in previous lifetimes. It also screens the karma that we may have developed that's weighing us down. And so for myself, I considered that I was well on in years before I even became aware of the role of the Guru in my life. Because throughout my high school years and then college, I knew I was interested in spiritual things. I'd gone to different churches. I read metaphysical books. And then I got a job overseas. And for a few years, I became more and more sure that what I need is a spiritual teacher, a guide, a master, to help me figure out the real meaning in life, to know what is really real, even though I had no idea what that might be. And so here I was, already in my mid-20s, when I got back to my hometown for a few months, and I was invited to an SRF meditation. And I was a little skeptic. And so I got there late. And I walked into this darkened room with candles, and there was incense, and there were these people sitting around on chairs and on the floor in complete silence, and these strange pictures on an altar. And the only instruction I got in that meditation was, shh, sit down. And that's what I did. And in that meditation, I experienced nothing. Nobody told me, look at the spiritual eye. I had no idea how to practice an affirmation. And yet, there was something I was aware of, and I couldn't have said it at the time, but I was aware of an intensity of focused attention that was very appealing. And I remember, as I got ready to drive away, this clear thought came to me, I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, I've found what I'm looking for. And so I signed up for the SRF lessons. I started reading Autobiography of a Yogi. And then, shortly thereafter, about the next week, I had to go on a business trip. Well, I had a trunk that had come in from overseas, and I had to get it to Charleston, South Carolina, to get it through customs. And I didn't have a car. And I didn't want to ride a bus. And this is in the mid-'70s. So the one thing you could still do then, if you were careful, was hitchhike. And so that's what I did, from Florida to South Carolina. And I got as far as Jacksonville, which is in the northeast corner of Florida, and was stranded. I was there on the side of a highway. It wasn't an interstate, so it was legal. But it was a big road and very busy. There were like 3 lanes of cars going by all the time. And nobody stopped to pick me up. And it was hot, and so I moved under a bridge where nobody could see me. And I had a little sign that said, Charleston, which nobody could read. But it didn't matter that much because I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi. And it was just these amazing insights that I'd never thought about before. But at the same time, as the hours went by, I realized I do need a ride. I need to get out of here somehow, so I'd better have a backup plan. And I thought to myself, okay, if this guru-disciple thing actually works, I need a ride by 4 o'clock. Otherwise, I'm going to have to leave the highway and find a bus station and get up there another way. So that was the inner agreement that I had. And so the hours kept going. I kept looking at my watch. It got to 4 o'clock. No ride. And by then, the wind of the cars had blown away my little sign. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it doesn't work this way. So I picked up my backpack, and I was walking off the highway when I saw out of the corner of my eye, there's a car from the 3rd lane over swerve through heavy traffic, and he stopped and gave me a ride. And that was very impressive because I wasn't hitchhiking anymore. He didn't know I was looking for a ride, but he stopped. And what impressed me further was that the driver's radio station was turned up full blast to this fire and brimstone radio station, which helped me realize the guru can use any instrument, any channel, to fulfill the needs of the devotee. And so I was convinced that was a, you could say, conversion experience. And every devotee has something similar to that in their own lives, this irrefutable inner confirmation that there is a presence beyond our senses that is definitely interacting and helping us, guiding us in our lives. That's the presence of the Guru. Things like Autobiography of a Yogi, falling on the head of Sister Shanti as she was desperately looking for spiritual guidance and her guru. You can read that on our website. It's right there, the whole story. I talked to another devotee. She said, "Oh, same thing happened to me. The book, it fell on my head, not once, but 2 times before I got the message." But you see, God, in His ultimate aspect, God is just too abstract for us to begin to comprehend. And so in the Guru, we have a form of God that is approachable, that we can relate to. And it doesn't matter that in SRF, our Guru is no longer in physical manifestation, because he has left an indelible image of his very approachable human personality through his teachings, through his writings, through all of the aspects of this path to which we can very much relate. But so much more than the outer aspects is this inner involvement, this inner living presence. And as the years go by, as the decades pass, we become more and more aware of and more dependent on that inner voice, that inner guidance. And of course, we develop this outwardly, this association with the Guru, through practicing his teachings, through all of the different things we've heard about in other classes of this convocation. It's reinforced there through service, through study, through introspection, through practicing the presence. And the more and more we apply these principles in our lives, the more we see how this interaction with the inner source, the Guru, those interactions are both constant and innumerable. But there's another aspect of this inner relationship which is not necessarily always so pleasant, because this is the divine friend in his role as spiritual disciplinarian. Because to get back to God, we have to change. And we're resistant to changing. We like the way we are. And we tend to stay this way for incarnations. But letting us know how it is we really do need to change if we want to get back to God, that's another of the responsibilities that the Guru takes on. And sometimes devotees may lament, "Oh, I just wish that I had come at a time I could have been in the ashram with Sri Yukteswar or with Paramahansaji." But the fact is that wherever we are, those are the exact conditions of what we actually need. Wherever we are right now is our Guru's ashram. You see, the Guru, through this subtle interaction with the events of our lives, with our thoughts, our feelings, everything that happens. He's helping us to work out our karma. He's helping us to see how we need to change our habits, to get beyond our comfort zones, to address all those limitations that have held us back for incarnations. That's His job. And it's taking place, again, at this inner level, this inner dialogue. And you listen and read those accounts of that first generation of disciples who were there in Paramahansaji's own lifetime, and they all say that is the involvement that he wanted them to have with him. It wasn't being in his physical presence. He wanted them to be developing that inner attunement. So he taught through hands-on training in conjunction with inner guidance. Rinpoche Ma points out he never sat down with those disciples and said, okay, this is what your flaws are, this is how you need to change. Never. It was all through, as I say, hands-on training, and then figuring out by listening and tuning in with that inner voice. And for myself, I've found this to happen countless times, where I've been given a task to do. I have no idea how to do this. All I can do is say, okay, I'll try. And help, Master. Help me. And it works. Somehow. It always comes through. But that's one thing Master says, and you can hear it in his recording, Awaken the Cosmic Dream. He said, that's one thing I do. I do walkie-talkie with you. He's always talking, and he's always on the other side listening. He said, it may be one-sided, but every tremor comes. We may think, oh, the Guru's not there. He most definitely is. Every tremor of feeling, of thought, whatever it may be, he's getting it. And it doesn't need to be one-sided, because we can tune in with getting his message if we make the effort. Which is not to say it's all easy, because there are so many things that happen in the spiritual life of every disciple which make no sense. Have you ever asked, why? Lord, why does it have to be like this? And when that happens, it sometimes, the mind says, well, the Guru's not there, he's not helping me, he just doesn't care. You know, when things are not going the way we want them to be, when life isn't letting us have things our way. And then we do also tend to impose our understanding on the nature of the Guru. And in his autobiography, our Guru explains, such persons often complained that they did not understand Sri Yukteswar, his Guru. Neither do you understand God, I retorted on one occasion. If a saint were clear to you, you would be one. Among the trillion mysteries, breathing every second, the inexplicable air, may one venture to ask that the fathomless nature of a master be instantly grasped? In other words, in our present state of consciousness, we can't comprehend and understand our spiritual training and the workings of the Guru in our lives. And this is where we may just have to follow blindly and trust and have faith that we are being protected and guided by a divine source. And I see at times devotees projecting their problems onto other people, onto other events, other conditions. In other words, not taking responsibility for their own karma, and instead projecting the problem outside of themselves. And when I see this, I think to myself, it's too bad, because really they are lengthening their spiritual journey unnecessarily. But then when I catch myself thinking this way, I introspect and see I'm kind of doing the same exact thing when I get upset with other people and conditions. And this motivates me to get busy with my own housekeeping. But on the other side, I also see devotees with these major life tests that come to them, in which they are working out huge blocks of karma, where they have debilitating accidents or degenerative disease or domestic situations which are unsolvably difficult. And these devotees, they accept it with incredibly right attitude as what they need from their guru at this time to help them work out whatever the karma may be in their lives. And when I see this, I reflect that they are really developing those qualities of surrender and humility and non-attachment which are the foundation of sainthood. Now, there's another important concept to understand in this discipline aspect of the guru, and that is the guru will never override our free will. He says, essentially, that it's inviolate. In Autobiography of a Yogi, given to us simultaneously with a soul and revocable never. So we have no choice but to have free choice. Which means we don't have to listen to those inner promptings, those inner suggestions. We can resist. We can be as headstrong and as obstinate as we want to be, and that's not going to affect the guru's commitment to us. But on the other hand, the amount of the guru's guidance that we are willing to apply in our lives, that is very much the throttle that controls how fast or how slow we progress on our spiritual journey. So, yeah, we're free to complain. It's too much. It makes no sense. We're free to rationalize. This is for somebody else, not for me. And when that happens, when we do that, the guru's inner voice falls silent. Master says his guru's reprimands, those scoldings, were terrible. Read this in Autobiography of a Yogi. During my early months with Master, I experienced a sensitive fear of his reprimands. I soon saw that his verbal vivisections were performed only on persons who, like myself, had asked him to discipline them. If any writhing student made a protest, Sri Yukteswar, unoffended, would fall into silence. Which is exactly what happens for us. Because those verbal vivisections, they are right there in the inner ear. But when we don't listen, silence. But on the other hand, if we inwardly say, okay, I don't understand it, but I'll try. Show me how to do it. Show me what to do. Just help me out. That attitude shifts our relationship from that of resentment to one of surrender. And this is what Master says in his autobiography. After I had abandoned underlying resentment, I found a marked decrease in my chastisement. In a very subtle way, Master melted into comparative clemency. In time, I demolished every wall of rationalization and subconscious reservation behind which the human personality generally shields itself. The reward was an effortless harmony with my Guru. And that is what's happening for every disciple as we accept that training we receive within. And just reflecting on my own resistance to change and multiplying that times the vast number of disciples that our Guru has taken responsibility for, it's staggering what he's actually doing. And he expresses that in this sentence: brave indeed is the Guru who undertakes to transform the crude ore of ego-permeated humanity. It's not just any soul that can transform human consciousness of so many different people into that divine consciousness. And we have to ask, why? What could motivate any being to do this? And this is the next sentence after that. A saint's courage is rooted in his compassion for Maya-bewildered men, the stumbling eyeless of the world. That's us right now. No clue about what is really real. But the motivation of the Guru, love. God's compassion. And so as we persevere, again, over the years, over the decades, doing our best to overcome our shortcomings and giving up our compulsions, not having to have things my way all the time, taking responsibility for our difficulties, putting aside all those incompatible desires, we discover that actually all of those things that we have wanted, every desire, is fulfilled in a subtle way by God through the Guru. We've fulfilled all of our ambitions. It's like all of that stuff that I had to do back then, I see, I don't need to, or I've fulfilled it in some other way. We see we're becoming the person of our dreams. And yet everything that we have said so far is still just a part of the whole, because we also have to look at the role of meditation as the Guru interfaces with the life and transformation of the disciple. Because this is where the Guru's influence on us becomes most personal and most transformative. Our meditation techniques are yet another of our Guru's blessings. He says, every time you meditate deeply on God, beneficial changes take place in the patterns of your brain. You heard those words already in another class during this convocation. But every time you practice the energization exercises, the Hong Sau technique of concentration, the Om technique of meditation, things are happening within that you may not be aware of. But our Guru explains that, of course, the most powerful of all our techniques is that of Kriya Yoga. Here's the continuation of that quote. When you practice the self-realization techniques of meditation, especially Kriya, you will actually see the light of God baptizing you. If you can see God as light, immediately that light changes your brain cells. It's just amazing what can actually be going on there without our being aware of it. And even if you are not aware of the light, changes are still taking place. Now we understand this technique is the highest of all our techniques, and it is reserved for those devotees, those disciples, who are willing and ready to pledge unconditional loyalty to this path and to our line of gurus. This technique is given as the Guru's diksha, or blessing, spiritual blessing, and really it establishes a covenant. A covenant is a spiritual contract. And in the Guru-disciple relationship, it's a contract for our soul liberation. Contract in which we as the devotee, the disciple, says, I will follow my Guru's guidance to the very best of my ability for as long as I live. And on the other side of that contract, the Guru makes the commitment that he will take that devotee to God, to final liberation, no matter how many times the devotee may fall on his or her face, no matter how long it may take, no matter whether they are on the same plane in the physical, astral, or causal universes, or on different planes. It doesn't matter. It's unconditional. Now, this Kriya technique is also the most powerful karma-destroying tool that there exists. Kriya has the power to destroy, to work out all our past karma. Karma from all those past incarnations that we're not even aware of, so that this lifetime can be the very last compulsive return in physical form. And this is the Guru's promise there in the Self-Realization Fellowship lessons. The Kriya technique will be the foundation, the continuously expanding base of your own self-realization. You must be true to yourself and to the Gurus of Self-Realization Fellowship by faithful practice of the liberating soul science. SRF is resolved to show you that cosmic consciousness is attainable in one lifetime if you properly and continuously cooperate in this divine endeavor. And the wording in that pledge, it also brings up another point. The Gurus of Self-Realization Fellowship, because I think most of us are very aware, we have a line of 6 liberated masters, gurus, in this path. And in Autobiography of a Yogi, we read about the integral role that each of them has played in bringing about this dispensation of Kriya Yoga in this age through Self-Realization Fellowship. And so in the Kriya Yoga pledge, we make the vow to the entire line of gurus. And of course, Paramahansaji is himself the preceptor or teacher of this line, which is fitting because he was the one designated to bring these teachings, this whole path, to the West. But the teachings themselves, the blessings, they encompass the entire line of our gurus. And this can be very helpful too, because while all the gurus are one in spirit, they're different personalities. Their manifestations in physical form will appeal differently to different people. So Jesus, for instance, may appeal to many in the West who've come up in that background, whereas Krishna may appeal to many in the East. And whichever guru you may feel closest to, it may change from time to time. So if you may feel a need for wisdom, you might tune in specifically with Sri Yukteswar and visualize that image right there at the point between your eyebrows. Or if you want to feel joy, you might tune in with Lahiri Mahashaya. And so everything, though, we've said about this guru-disciple relationship and the inner connectivity inside, it applies equally to all of our 6 gurus. But that being said, in spite of this 6-fold blessing, as it were, it may happen sometimes, perhaps oftentimes, that it seems that nothing is happening in meditation. We sit there, we practice the techniques, and nothing changed. I don't feel any different. I didn't have any experiences. And there's various reasons for this. One is we may be looking for phenomenal experiences rather than focusing on the very subtle interchanges that are taking place. How many are able to detect changes in your brain cells? It's so subtle. When the breath just pauses by itself, we may not even be aware of it. It's just we're feeling peace. Moods that we've had can just evaporate like they've never been. The experience of deepening contentment in our lives. All of these are manifestations of the Guru helping us through meditation. But in addition to this, there's also the karma factor, because I think our karmic baggage prevents our being able to experience the higher states of meditation until we start to work that stuff out. We may have experiences of those higher states early on when the Guru pulls aside the blinds and gives us an incontestable experience of that higher state. But then the shutters close and we have to deal with that karmic baggage again. But again, in Kriya, we have the most effective tool to work it out. So keep on practicing to the best of your ability. One Kriya, correctly practiced, remember, it takes about 30 seconds to do, but it dissolves the equivalent of 1 year of our karmic baggage. And so that's pretty good leverage, I would suggest. And no, in our present state of human consciousness, we are not able to see the karmic balance sheet and how much is still there and how much we've worked out. And we may, though, sense there's an awful lot that's still there because I don't seem to be getting as far as I'd like in my meditations. And you know, things may even seem pretty bleak toward the end of life. When we prepare to take our final breath from this earth life and stand before the cosmic tribunal there in the courtroom of omnipresence to determine whether we get to move on from this earth plane or whether we have to come back in another physical incarnation. And it's like the manager of the karma bank, as it were. He looks at our account and he says, you have $100,000 karma debt that you owe for all the stuff that you've done, and for all your efforts, you've only been able to work out $25,000 worth of it. And so he says, sorry, back to the cosmic clink for you. But this is where it's really good to have a legal advocate, and that's our guru. Because in a litigious universe run by cosmic law, it's good to have the very best legal advice possible. And I'd say we do pretty good with our guru because he has already gotten many, many other devotees out of the dungeon of delusion. And so as our spiritual advocate, he argues our case before the cosmic tribunal. He doesn't change the laws, but he knows the loopholes. And so before the judge, he can stand up and say, I demand the release of my client, of this disciple, forever. This seeker has now fulfilled the entirety of his or her karmic debt down to the last penny. Yeah, it's true, he's actually paid only 25% of the karmic total, but I myself am going to put up matching funds to the same amount. And as to the 50% outstanding beyond that, I have an affidavit signed right here by Divine Mother herself that through her grace, she will clear the rest. And we're free. So keep working at your meditations and don't worry about whatever obstacles or difficulties may seem to be in the way. We're getting there faster than we can know. And remember too, the goal, it's beyond our comprehension, enjoyable, beyond imagination of expectancy, samadhi bliss. And this spiritual covenant with the Guru, that too is beyond our comprehension. That the Guru has actually been with us forever. He's with us now and will be there with us for all futurity. And especially at that transition in which we go from this plane into the next, the transition of death. I'd like to share a final story along these lines. Some of you may know of Swami Shyamananda, He was one of the significant early disciples. He was particularly instrumental in helping Sri Dayamata in the 1960s to put Paramahansaji's work in India, Yogoda Satsanga Society of India, on a firm foundation. And you can read, there's a wonderful write-up in the summer 2014 Self-Realization magazine about all of this. But in his last days, Swami Shyamananda was suffering from a terminal disease. And he had come here to the Mother Center, and several of the monks were assigned to look after his non-medical needs. But the monk who told me this story was one of those who was assigned to help him out. And at one point, he had to go downtown to a hospital in Los Angeles for medical tests and observations, that sort of thing. And so this monk who told me the story says that he accompanied Swamiji to the hospital, and it was an overnight stay, so the monk stayed outside his room on a bench. There was a bench there, and he sat and meditated and dozed. And these are this monk's words, that Swamiji never took pain medication, but he had a little bell that he would ring if he wanted us to come help. And as the night wore on, in the early morning, I decided to peek in to his room to see if everything was okay. And I quietly opened the door and looked in. Now, I'm not an experienced person, but the vibration in the room froze me. The best way I can explain it is that a wonderful holiness surrounded everything. Swamiji was sitting up in bed, his eyes looking into another world. It was so intensely private. I closed the door and I called Dayama and explained what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. She and Anandama were due to visit later in the morning, and so when they came, they quietly went into his room. And now this part of the story is printed there in our fall magazine, Summer 2014 magazine. It was also printed in the fall 1971 magazine. That's why I'm getting it confused. But Sri Dayamata said, I walked into his room and noticed tears flowing down his cheeks. He was not a man who shed tears easily. I walked up to the bedside and asked, what is the matter? As I drew closer and saw the ecstatic expression on his face, I knew they were not tears of sorrow, but of joy. He only slowly became aware of my presence. So drawn within was his mind. And then he said to me, oh, Ma, I've just had the most wonderful experience. As I lay here in this bed, knowing full well that my days are numbered, that it may not be God's will that I recover from this illness, I've had just one prayer in my heart. I want to love you. I want to love you. Fulfill that desire, God. And as I prayed, suddenly, such love, such joy engulfed me. Oh, Ma, such joy. And then Babaji came. He is all love. Oh, so loving. I'm utterly filled with that love. What joy, oh, what joy is mine, I know this is the only goal of life. And I think it's significant that Babaji had a very special connection with Swami Shyamananda from before he became aware of Self-Realization Fellowship. He'd had a vision. Inwardly, he saw Babaji's image years before, and the first time he had no idea what that vision was, who that saint was. First time he opened Autobiography of a Yogi, though, there was Babaji. And so here it is. At the end of life, final consummation. And the monk who was there, he continued, just imagine, that visitation with Babaji happened right on the other side of the wall I was leaning on, but had no sense of what was happening inside. But I will never forget looking into his hospital room and experiencing what I did. That will stay with me forever. And so this is the depth of experience that is in store for every disciple. It is a progression that starts without our even having any awareness of the existence of that relationship with the Guru, to the awareness that he is with me and will be with me forevermore, showering us, each one, with supernal joy. And again, we can ask, what is in all of this for the Guru? And he explains that in the very last sentence of his Autobiography of a Yogi, those closing words. In sending loving thought vibrations to the thousands of Kriya Yogis scattered like shining jewels over the earth, I often think gratefully, Lord, Thou hast given this monk a large family. So, Jai Guru, many blessings on your path.